Good evening, everyone. We welcome you to the first interview of our documentary series. This is a collaboration between VIT University and IISER Tirupati for the iGEM 2022 competition. I am Snigdha from VIT, joined with Chagan from IISER Tirupati, and we shall interview guests to share insights on the ethics of synthetic biology. Our guest for today is Dr. Shivakumar A., an associate senior professor at VIT Vellore. Currently, he works on structural activity relationship aspects of natural and synthetic compounds against various molecular targets. He is also interested in the structural activity relationship of quinolone-based lead molecules for treating inflammatory disorders like cancer. He is also a member of the Animal Ethics Committee at VIT. Thank you, sir, for agreeing to do this interview with us.
Thank you, Sita.
Our first question to you is, when and why did you start exploring this field of ethics in synthetic biology?
So the ethics and synthetic biology work started from my PhD days. I was working with Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So the Mycobacterium tuberculosis, once it infects a human, starts surviving in the macrophage of the lungs for several years in a dormant state. But during the dormant state, the MTB shuts down all the non-essential metabolic pathways. Only the essential metabolic pathways are active, and without dividing, the MTB is able to survive in macrophage for several number of years. So this particular quality made me to think of synthetic biology and engineered microbes. If we engineer the metabolic pathways in such a way that only the essential metabolic pathways are active in a microbe, that is going to give a stealth property for the microbe, and whatever we want, whatever goals we need, which can be achieved through synthetic biology, I think this is going to be the future of biotechnology.
Thanks a lot for answering this question, sir. Our next question to you is, how was your experience working with ethics in synthetic biology?
So usually in common people, so they are afraid of the genetically modified organisms or DNA-based products. So they think that there are possibilities of social welfare problems or potentially harmful consequences due to these products. But if you look at the positive ways of synthetic biology, which is very useful in industrial innovations. So novel metabolites can be produced, and which can solve the medical problems. In agricultural sector, we have a lot of applications with synthetic biology. The energy crisis, we have the solution with synthetic biology. I have a couple of examples with synthetic biology based products which are available in the market. For example, in the medical field, we have Enterogermina, which is a modified Lactobacillus casei. So usually we know that there is antibiotic resistance, and the pathogenic microbes acquire the properties of antibiotic resistance, and which becomes a problem. We are not able to treat them using the available antibiotics. We are in a 5th generation antibiotics era. That means several of the microbes have developed resistance to the available antibiotics. So we have utilized this particular property for a good bacteria. So Lactobacillus casei is a probiotic which is very essential for healthy gut. So they have incorporated the antibiotic resistant genes in Lactobacillus casei, and the product is available as Enterogermina. So even with antibiotic treatments, the intestinal flora is not disturbed, which is very good and which is very healthy. So from the pediatric use up to adult, it is very well prescribed. There is no adverse effects at all, which gives or ensures the safety level of modified synthetic biology made engineered microbes, and they are good qualities. Another example is Bacteriophage. So already we have totally drug resistant microbes or extensively drug resistant microbes. So we are not able to treat them using antibiotics. So bacteriophages are another important aspect in the field of drug discovery, which are able to eradicate many of the non-treatable microbial infections in human. So these are certain positive points of synthetic biology which are coming up, which will address the ethics. So if it is correctly used, there is no issue of ethics at all.
Thank you, sir, for that insightful response. Our third question to you is, do you think ethics can affect research progress in synthetic biology?
So in any new invention, people are afraid usually, but as a layman point of view, we don't understand what are the regulations and rules need to be followed. As a biotechnologist, we know that we have biosafety level 1, 2, 3 for different microbes. If these principles are correctly applied, there is no need to afraid about the engineered microbes.
So, sir, along with that question, we also want to ask another question. What difference do you find in ethics framed in India versus abroad? Should we frame collaborative ethical laws with other countries so that the development of science happens together?
Yeah, sure. This is a good question. I'll cite an example in pharmaceutical industry. In case of regulatory aspects, so we had FDA. Only FDA was regulating the drug products throughout the world. Later, we had European Regulatory Agency. We have Indian CDSCO, Central Drug Standard Control Organization. Each country had their own regulatory bodies. Now what happened is, once in 2 years, there is an international conference on harmonization. All these people working on regulatory aspects join together, sit together, they discuss what are the developments and which benefits the human society. So same kind of aspects need to be applied in synthetic biology and biotechnology based products. We need to some kind of harmonization conferences so that we will know what happens in other parts of the world in case of regulatory aspects. With respect to synthetic biology, India is at the early stage. We are a little bit lagging behind. The government of India has formed task force to frame the rules and regulations for synthetic biology. We are catching up already. So sooner we will have a refined version of rules and regulations for synthetic biology.
Thank you, sir, for that response. Our final question to you for today's interview is, how important do you think it is to integrate in ethics into academic curricula in the field of life sciences?
So yes, it is very mandate to include the synthetic biology and ethics involved in synthetic biology in academic curriculum. So it gives an opportunity to understand reasons behind ethical principles, why these things are incorporated. So the students have a better understanding about these aspects. Also, it improves the values and ethical decision-making qualities in a student, particularly biotechnology-based students and medical students. So it is very essential to include the ethics and synthetic biology aspects in the academic curriculum.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for sharing your insights on this topic. We got to know a lot about bioethics. Your valuable inputs would help us and our other fellow iGEM teams in putting emphasis on this issue of bioethics, and also would help us plan and modulate our projects accordingly. Thank you so much for taking your time out of your busy schedule and being here with us today. Hope to see you in person soon, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Jagan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, everyone. We welcome you to the second interview of our documentary series. This is a collaboration between VIT University and IISER Tirupati for the iGEM competition 2022. I am Snigdha from VIT, joined with Sejal from IISER Tirupati, and we shall interview guests throughout the course of this series to share insights on the ethics of synthetic biology. Our guest for today is Mayank Sharma. He is currently an associate scientist with Syngene International. He has prior experience from Panacea Biotech, Reliance Life Sciences, and the National Center for Cell Sciences. His current projects revolve around cell-based assay development and other related domains. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview with us, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for such a nice introduction. And I definitely wish all the best from my side, from my team side, and from my company side for iGEM Summit.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
To begin with our questions, our first question to you today is, when and why did you start exploring this field of ethics in synthetic biology?
So when you say start exploring ethics in synthetic biology, I'm definitely delighted to answer this question. So it's been 8 years that I am associated with biotech companies in India. And prior to that, I was associated with academic institutes. Being scientist, we don't only do science with rational and logical thinking, but we are also responsible towards what we do and how we do and what will be the outcome of it. So at Syngene, we believe that doing right when no one is watching you is called integrity. And we strongly stand on our core ethical values, principles, and integrity. Synthetic biology has revolutionized today's world, and we are benefited not only in the field of healthcare, but also in the agriculture sector as well. Since we are a part of a society, and it's our moral responsibility to think about the righteousness and ethics of the work we do. Research done by us contributes to the society and mankind. And therefore, just doing science without thinking about society is of no use.
Thanks a lot, sir, for answering this question. Our next question to you is, how is your experience working with ethics in synthetic biology?
Synthetic biology and genetic engineering has made many possible that were perceived to be impossible. So we are in the era of cell therapies and personalized medicines. And due to technological advancement, we do amalgamate artificial intelligence, data science, and system biology all together. We can do predictions and analyze the systemic response of a medicine or any therapy. As the adage goes, charity starts at home, or charity begins at home. So we work in a highly ethical manner, right from lab to manufacturing, right from the time we develop the prototype at a small scale. We follow EHS policy. We do take care of the environment we live in. We work with proper precautions by wearing personal protective equipments. We are contemporaneous in our documentation practices, and we do give a lot of emphasis in maintaining data. Data breaches or the data which is generated by the experiment are definitely secured secured with a foolproof manner. Data breaches are strictly forbidden. Any therapies, vaccine, drugs, nutraceutical, or any biotherapeutical molecules we work with has to undergo stringent regulatory guidelines and inspection by national and international regulatory board and government bodies. We are responsible scientists, and stakeholders are responsible for any mishaps or any wrong which has happened to the society by the work we do. So these therapy has to undergo clinical trials before it comes to market.
Thank you for that response, sir. Our next question to you is, do you think ethics can affect the research progress in synthetic biology?
For any research to happen, there are grants and approval required. For any project to commence, the proposal need to be reviewed and approved by the scientific community. And on an annual basis, work progress report have to be submitted to the scientific community, which do check the ethical concerns associated with the research work. Grant and regulatory committees do measure and maintain the balance between freedom to explore science versus exploitation of science that may cause potential harm to the society. Publication and reports are critically analyzed by scientific committees, government, and publication board. In case of any concern or red flag, grant will be withdrawn and project will be closed. And those who are those who are undertaking these projects are definitely held responsible for that. So if you are doing good for the society, and if your intentions are good, if your work is good, then it will definitely comes in the market. Or if there is an evil behind it, or with a bad intention, regulatory authorities do check that, and they do dissolve the project immediately.
Thank you, sir. So this answers our question. So what difference do you find in ethics framed in India versus abroad? Should we frame collaborative ethical laws with other countries so that the development of science happens together?
So when you say about collaboration of the ethical laws between India and abroad, uh, India are already India has already joined hands with with universities and the institutes in abroad to frame such ethical laws, and the work that we do in India has no exception. It has to follow all the laws which are framed. However, genetically modified organisms and engineered cells do raise some ethical concern about playing with nature or undermining the differences between living and machine, because some of the small prototypes or the small building blocks developed by synthetic biology, it does violate the rule of the nature, and deliberate misuse of science, and this has to done with the case by case or situation by situation. To avoid dual use dilemma of using or misusing science, Engineering Biology Research Consortium proposes the statement of ethics. And this statement of ethics has been strictly followed while we work. First, it states that that we need to first seek and or create the product or process that benefit people, society, or environment. So whenever we start a project, we don't start with an intention that that ultimately it has to go into biological warfare, or it has been misused by someone else or against the society. We do start a project with an intent that it will ultimately benefit mankind and society. Next is consider and weigh the benefit of research against potential harm. So some of the research that is being conducted in India and in abroad, they do raises the concern of potential harm. So before getting grant, before getting the project started, it has been definitely weighed that what are the cons associated with the research that we do. Apart from that, there are certain diseases which are not being easily cured by any of the therapy that do exist today. So therefore, we have cell therapies, we have adoptive stem cell transfer, we have CAR T therapy, engineered. We try to engineer cells and we try to inject to patients. So without an off-target effect, without affecting any other organ or any other tissues, these cells will definitely go and kill your cancer cells. But having said that, these are the therapies which usually people try at a last stage of cancer or at a last stage of any disease where no other medicines are actually working. But to the person whom these therapies are tried, definitely the cons have been told. And not only that, before approving any such therapies, we have to give in written that what are the pros and cons associated with it. And we definitely have a balance of what is good versus what is harm. Next is incorporate equity and justice in the selection and implementation of engineering, biology, education, research, development policy, and commercialization. That we definitely do justice to the work that we do, and no piece of work is actually done in a very substandard way. Everything has a high quality that we do it with the highest level of precision. seek to openly distribute the result of early stage research and development. So the work, the research work that people conduct in India and in abroad, these people do have access on that, because it need to be published in the public forum. Also, what need to be published and what not need to be published, even that is important. So therefore, the fifth point, that is protect the right of individual associated with engineering biology, including the freedom of inquiry of researchers and the free and informed consent of research participants. This fifth law, it clearly states that to whomsoever subject you are trying your experiment, to whomsoever kind of model you want to build in, every small minor intricate details you need to submit to the regulatory bodies. You need to submit to the people, those who are actually granting your projects, and they will carefully scrutinize your work updates. They are carefully check the ethics of the work that you are doing in. Parallelly, you also need to protect people rights information as a part of intellectual property rights. So some informations are not to be disclosed, and they are to be disclosed only to the regulatory bodies and not to the public in general. Support open communication between engineering biology research and the stakeholders who might be affected by research, development, and deployment of new technologies. So the communication is a must. There is nothing called as a data hidden thing, that we are not allowed, we are not supposed to hold any data with us. We are not supposed to hold any small form or even the minute form of the project details with us. It has to be transparent. Whether we collaborate with any industry in the West or any research institute in abroad or in the country, there has to be an open communication with what all modifications we do. So in India, we follow the laws of Indian and National Regulatory Authority, and we do work hand in hand with these international contributors to carry out our research. So the laws which are there in the West and which are there in India, they do work hand in hand. Since some of the work, the kind of work are not usually conducted in India due to severe ethical issues. But in India, mostly people are working with the cell-based therapies and trying to work with a personalized medicine. Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for that response. Our final question to you for today is, how important is it to integrate ethics into academic curricula in the field of life sciences?
So it's really good to see that educational curriculum is timely updating, and whatever I have learned in my school days or in 10+2, probably what you guys are learning is way different from that and advanced from that. And it is the education that we undertake built our career. So therefore, ethics and integration of the ethical laws into the education system is definitely important. It is important to know the pros and cons of the scientific ideas and the ethical concern associated with it, to avoid misuse of technology, as freedom comes with a lot of responsibility, as I said this in my while answering my first question. So therefore, you might be having lot of ideas to develop a small molecule or to develop a small prototype of your idea, but it is of no use unless and until it comes into the manufacturing level, right? So whatever ideas you guys have, it has to undergo critical, it has to pass the critical ethical laws. And it is therefore important for you guys also to know what are those laws, at least in a nutshell level. So therefore, it is highly important to address ethics in the subject curriculum.
Thanks for sharing your insights on this topic,
Thank you.
sir.
Thank you.
We got to know a lot about bioethics. Your valuable inputs would help us and other fellow iGEM teams in putting emphasis on this issue and also help us plan and modulate our projects accordingly. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and being here with us today. We hope to see you in person someday.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for interviewing me and letting me share my views on ethics to you all, and all the best for your future.
Good morning, ma'am. We
Good morning.
welcome you to the third interview of our podcast series. This is a collaboration between VIT University and IISER Tirupati for iGEM 2022 competition. I am Shivangi along with Neha from iGEM IISER Tirupati. Due to some unavoidable circumstances, Snigdha from VIT vellore couldn't join us today. Today, we welcome Dr. Nirmala Krishnamurthy to know and share her views on bioethics. She is a visiting faculty for chemistry and life sciences at IISER Tirupati. These include topics in biochemistry, organic chemistry, general chemistry, biology, and their relevance to diseases such as cancer. She is also an integral part of the ethics committee at IISER Tirupati, and also she has over 10 years of experience in the field.
Okay,
Neha?
ma'am. Okay, ma'am. So, like, we just wanted to know our first question that when and why did you start exploring this field, like the ethics in life sciences research?
In research. All right. Looking back, I wish it had been earlier. I would say it was my PhD. Even though we had a research program in our masters, excuse me, I did that in India. It's only when I started my PhD in the United States as a grad student that this concept of ethics itself came in. And even that wasn't a regular format. It was more of practices, ethical practices in the lab that you were taught either by the faculty or by senior grad students on how you maintain a lab notebook, what things you have to be looking out for, what are good and bad practices in ethics, and things like that. So I would say that was my first exposure to ethics in life science research.
Okay, ma'am. That's a very humble origin to anything, I guess.
Yeah, as I said, it could have been earlier, but I also think it's part of the time we were in. People are a lot more aware of ethics in India right now than were back when I was a master's student, is what I feel. Or if they weren't teaching us that this has to be done. Mostly we just followed instructions, came up with ideas, that's about it. This was not something that was discussed in detail, which I think looking back would have been helpful to have, but that's what it was.
It's good that we are way more aware about that now.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, Shivangi, you can go ahead.
Thanks a lot for answering, ma'am. Our next question to you is, how is your experience working with ethics in this field?
Working with ethics in the field. As I said, it's kind of I believe it's a learning curve. I learn something every day, though by now I should know probably everything, but it's mostly practices, things that you hear about. So I personally believe I am on the learning curve, learning new things. And it's been a good experience. Mostly you get to hear the right things to do. And if at all you hear, okay, this something was bad, then you know why it was, what should have been done, and what should be done in the future. Through my studies, through grad school, and then my postdoc, I had this opportunity to help other students with understanding ethics. Now, I do want to make it clear here, I was studying in a foreign country, and there were a lot of immigrants like me, whose exposure to ethics in science was pretty minimal. It was not something they were taught back in their bachelor's or master's degree. So when they came in for their PhD, it was the sudden change to understanding all of this. So with my own background during my PhD, I was able to help those people. And in some way, you learn through the process. I believe when you teach, you're also learning. And I understood that this is something, understanding about ethics in general is something several countries have to work on. And I help my, lab mates, especially graduate students, and I trained a lot of undergraduates. So it's something we teach them as we do research. And then when I moved on to a career, it was talking to these undergraduate students about ethics. And this is true not just for research, as you know, it's also in classes, something that people have to understand. But when you're in a lab, it becomes all the more important that you're aware of these rules. And surprisingly, a lot of people aren't. And so my own, progress has been that while I've taught other people, I've also learned in this journey. And I think that's a good thing. And at IISER itself, as you mentioned, I'm part of the ethics committee, and we discuss this with our students every year. And while we are the ones from the ethics committee starting the discussion, students always come up with very interesting points, very important questions, because in ethics, there are these questions where you start hitting the gray areas, and then you really have to think very deep and figure out what is the right way to do it. So as we do this every year, I think I speak for the committee also, but at least personally for me, I'm also on this learning curve. I understand maybe some travails that our students are facing. Maybe they've heard of something, a particular case study, and we all learn through that process. So to go back to my first slide, it's a learning curve. And it's a good curve. It's something that you have to be working on, I think, all your life as you're practicing science. It's something to be aware of. It's never something that ends. It's not like I've learned everything, that's it, it's over. Yes, you've learned a lot, but you have to always be aware of the changes that happen, of how people are reacting, and how you help students through this process.
Okay, ma'am. So it's learning curve for you as well as your students.
I hope so. I hope they see it that way. I can only speak for myself. But I hope they see it that way. And I think education itself is such a process, right? There is no end to it. True, you might know all the basic rules, but there are always interesting scenarios, especially when it comes to ethics. And you might be in a different lab. You might be working with under different circumstances. So you might face different problems. So in some way, you have to learn every day as you're working along. And that keeps you on your toes too.
That's very true, ma'am. And coming along to that answer, like the third question is that how do you think, and do you think that ethics can affect the research progress in science? And if yes, then how does it do?
Yes, with a caveat. Now, it depends on what you say affect research progress. If you think in a global sense, is it good for science? Absolutely. There's no two questions about it. I mean, obviously, pretty much everybody has to agree on that knowing and understanding ethics is important if you're practicing research. Now, it's always easy. And I know a lot of people don't want to talk about it. One of the reasons it's so challenging in several countries is, of course, there's ignorance. People really don't know that they have to do this. But also, following ethical guidelines all the time means you are taking the difficult path. You are taking the difficult road to navigate. It might not be true every day. Most of it is pretty straightforward. But sometimes the pressure of performing in science, especially, the whole publish or perish, the pressure in a very famous lab, everybody's competing. There are other labs working in tandem, and you want to be the first to achieve this. There's a lot of pressure on students and faculty. And then to follow absolutely all ethical guidelines means you are taking the hard path. And yes, it will affect your research if you decide that this is exactly what you want to do. And this is something we've discussed, when we talk with our students at IISER Tirupati. Yes, it's the hard path, but it's the right path. There is the sense of satisfaction at the end of the day when you are following ethical guidelines. There has been a study, and I know we discussed this with our students, that several faculty, early career, mid-career faculty, when asked anonymously, have admitted to breaching ethical rules. It might not be what some people consider, a big deal, but everything in ethics is a big deal. Even if you change one data point, it's technically wrong. And several faculty have admitted anonymously for this work that yes, over time, they might have breached rules. And so it really does affect. And it is a hard path to follow. But that is why we need to train students as they grow up. So when they become leaders in their field, they will take this difficult path and make sure it's the right way to do it. Will it affect? Yes, maybe it will slow down. So, and I think that's what concerns researchers, that somehow you will be slowed down. Your research will be personally affected. But as I said, this is something you have to see, you have to step back and see in the long run. Because you make a mistake once and you will get caught. Trust me, these days, there's a higher percentage of people getting caught. You'll never lose this, the bad name that comes associated with it. You will never get away from it. So yes, it might affect you, your research, the timelines. It might be difficult. And sometimes you might be, there might be pressure to take the easy route, but it is necessary that you follow ethics. And I think that's why it's crucial that people are imbibed with this information that you have to have this. It's not a choice eventually, because you have to learn and adhere to it. There is no other way. It might be tough, but that's the way to do it.
And I guess also for our scientific communication.
For answering, ma'am. The next.
Yeah, Shivangi, go ahead. Yes, ma'am. So as for our general scientific responsibilities also, I guess science communication also, it's very important. Otherwise, people do think that researchers and scientists, they might bring out some doomsday situation out of nowhere. And
yeah,
have to, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's not talked about much, and I'm assuming this is what you're wanting to discuss. When we discuss science in the public forum, it's very different from how we discuss it in a research institute or any science and technology institute. If you notice any news media story, especially all these different channels, it's like, oh, this cures cancer, this does this. I mean, it's all these big statements. And I think people don't understand that there are some ethics involved too. And I think science communication has to be a little more clear about what happens. And I think that's why scientists have to be involved. It'll be nice when people trained in science actually take up science communication. So they will understand that there are some ethical values to how you disperse this information. Nothing wrong in screaming from the hilltops about the achievements that science, your particular researchers made. That's okay, but it has to be times, or at least the communication doesn't go very well. They make a hype about it, and it's not correct. And that worries me when I read news media stories about, oh, they've already found a cure for this, or this has been solved. No, not really. This is one small step in the giant scheme of things. And that's very crucial to understand. So I think there are some ethical values to be looked into here also.
Very true, ma'am. Shivangi, you can go ahead.
Thanks, ma'am, for answering the question. The next question is, what difference do you find in ethics trained in India versus abroad? Should we frame collaborative ethical laws with other countries so that the development of science happens together?
Yes, to your second part. As to the first part, I can only mostly speak from my own experience. And I think there is a big difference. So we are, I think, bridging the gap a lot these days. As I mentioned, when I first went there for my graduate studies to the US, we were not made aware of all of these. And they take it a lot more seriously in several Western countries, Europe and the US and Australia. They take these ethical issues very seriously, and they start imbibing this information into their students from an earlier age. And that starts from taking a test to how do you write your answers in a closed book test, take home test, from there to working in lab, and what are the guidelines you follow, be it safety to ethical guidelines, everything. They do a very thorough job. There are a lot of workshops, meetings, seminars, discussions on how to tackle these situations. And I think all of that is good. We are definitely making strides now, and that's a good thing. Because even here, as you might have noticed over the years, there's a lot more discussion on ethical topics and what our students should be doing in different scenarios. And it will be nice to have something a little more global that everybody can agree on. It's not very easy though. It's very hard to make rules that will fit every country. What we can do is have a framework of rules that we can all agree on. And that is true to a large extent. For example, in a lot of publications, since articles come from all over the country, the guidelines they make, pretty much everybody across the world has to adhere to. So yes, your country might not have a certain set of rules, but if you aim to publish in a journal, a well-established journal in your field, but it is published from a different country, you still have to adhere to those rules. And so in some way, you all start following those ethical set of guidelines. This is especially true with human subjects. There are guidelines in several countries on how you work with human subjects. The good thing is developing nations have also caught on. They understand the importance. And even here in India, we have an awesome set of guidelines to follow. The more important thing for us here is to actually be aware of those rules and follow them. I don't think it's a lack of rules that's the issue. It's a wonderful set of guidelines. It's just that we need to train our people to follow this. And once we do that, we pretty much fall in line with most of the world standards. So that's not an issue. I don't think we need to set up a framework. As long as we all agree that this is it, people are aware. Government bodies, which usually regulate all of this, is pretty much aware of what happens in the rest of the world. And at IISER, we have a lot of statutory committees that look into this. So we are on par, I would say, in several cases with the rest of the world. Can we work together to do something better? Of course, that's always there. I mean, it'll be nice if there is more talk at the universities level too. I'm sure there's talk at the government level, but when it comes down to research universities, it'll be nice if different institutions can talk to each other. When people sign MOUs, usually there's an understanding, so that's good. And when students from two different countries work in a project, again, that is something to be discussed. But it needs to happen. All of that will take time. But overall, we have made strides. And I think the more we do to educate both the common man, who's eventually coming into working in science, and then our students themselves, once they are actually working in the lab, I think that will make a difference eventually. As I said, we have the rules. We just have to make sure they are implemented all the time.
That is a very good point, ma'am, that it's not the lack of rules, it's just people who are unable to.
Yes,
so
that's true with anything, right? I mean, you go out on the roads here, we have all traffic rules. Question is, do people follow them? If everybody did, life would be a lot easier for us to, travel. So the government does everything to set the rules in place. Eventually, part of it is also the public willing to follow that. So it's the same thing with this, that when we have people in the lab working, we have to guide. And that onus comes on the institution, the faculty, and eventually the students themselves.
That's true, ma'am. And coming to our last question for this session, uh, how do you think we can integrate ethics into our academic curriculum? Because it's not
Yeah.
easy for people to actually start following something they don't know about.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that it's that pretty much boils down to the main thing, right? All these questions we've discussed, all these points we can discuss about ethics. Eventually, it comes down to how do we get this message to? I think what we could do, and that's true for any country, in any place, any university, institute, school, colleges, make it part of your curriculum. I know sometimes, unless things are mandatory, people don't follow them. Maybe if that's what was in your particular place, that's great. But it would be nice, excuse me, if students are given an opportunity to learn this right off the bat, maybe right after they enter a research institution, the first year, have a discussion, uh, teach them what the basics are, and ask their thoughts. What are they aware of? What do they know and what do they not know? I mean, unless somebody asks those questions and we find answers for those from the students, it's very hard to proceed. And then we go from there. This training doesn't come in one day. And a lot of people believe that if you're in the lab, it'll all happen. Well, to some extent, in some labs, the culture is there to follow this, which is great. But not all labs operate exactly the same way. And not all PIs are trained for that. So I think we should not just put the burden that if you join a lab, you will know about ethics in research. I think it has to come a little before that. Even having a discussion in high school is not a bad idea. A lot of them will go into science in some form or fashion, and it's okay to learn that. And same thing, even if you're going to say engineering medicine, which seems to be the dream path for a lot of students in our country, they will still deal with patients. They will still deal with projects where ethics have to be followed. So starting at a school level is still a good idea, understanding ethics. And then once you hit your college level, it should be part of the curriculum, not this one-time thing that somebody does, because people always forget it. You do something for a time and then say, okay, move on. Nobody cares. But if it's part of the culture you are in, then it becomes part of your life itself. So it is something that should be practiced every day. So talking to the students, having workshops, having discussions, seminars, anything that will get them to be involved would be a great idea. And that means you can involve not just our students, but also faculty, because they can be aware of all the things they have to know. At the same time, also be informed of some of the things that students don't know, so they can be trained in their labs. And so when students eventually go to labs, they already come with some sort of understanding of what is expected. And then the lab culture can foster more ethical behavior. But as I said way before, it's a learning process. You don't start one day and then say, I'm done, I've learned everything, I'm all good. You learn every day. The earlier you start, the better for you. And you learn something every day and you move on and you practice it. So learning is one thing, and of course, practicing is another. You'll have to put that into practice. And for that, you need a lot of training to do something every day, follow diligently all those rules, because there are a lot of rules. And unless you practice them, they will seem like difficult rules to follow. But if it's part of your curriculum, part of something you've always done, then it's not that difficult, right? It should not be something that's enforced, that if you don't follow this, there are these repercussions, which is true. There are repercussions. This institute will mandate these rules. But instead of taking it that way, if you just make it part of your life, if you're going to be working in a lab, this should also be part of your life. It's not a different set of things. It's like you come in, you wear your safety gear. It's the same way. Imagine you have to have these ethical rules in your head and you follow along. So if you do that, it makes it less strenuous on you. And for that, I do believe it would be good to have it as part of a curriculum thing, maybe a week-long discussion. Just, it doesn't have to be somebody lecturing to you. It could be case studies, it could be discussions, it could be questions posed, moral dilemmas. I remember as a postdoc, we had this wonderful discussion session on ethics. What they did was they gave us these complicated issues. And this is not this run-of-the-mill stuff. Somebody plagiarized, somebody did this. No, no, no. It was more difficult case studies. And we had these little groups, and they would throw this problem on how, as a PI, you would deal with this, or how, as a student, you would handle this. Not all of them are easy answers. And some of them, it's like, oh my God, I don't even know how to do this. Then people discuss. Those kind of sessions would throw people challenges on how to deal with ethical challenges. And I think that's a good practice. If you know how to deal with that, you can handle things in your own research. And those should not become difficult things. It should be part of your life as you do this research. At least that's my thought on this.
So it's just not restricted to academia. It's related to everybody who does research all the time.
Yes, absolutely. And it doesn't have to be, as we think is bioresearch or chemistry research. It could be anything. You're practicing as a doctor, you're treating patients. They have a set of rules. They have a set of ethics that they follow, right? It's the same thing. Depending on the work you do, your rules might shift a little bit, but the basic logic of following ethics stays the same. And you have to be aware and make it part of your life itself. Then it's a lot more easier.
So ethics being a learning curve and getting it into our habits rather than seeing it just as guidelines to follow. This was Dr. Krishnamurthy having and sharing her views on bioethics. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your valuable inputs. And I hope that all other iGEM teams and everybody who is working on science would take this issue seriously and modulate their projects accordingly. Thank you so much for taking out the time. We hope to see you again.
Yes, good luck with everything. And I hope you get to interact with a lot of other students and spread the message around. So thank you for having me.
We welcome you to the fourth interview of our podcast interview series. This is a collaboration with BIT University and IISER Tirupati for iGEM 2022 competition. I am Shivangi along with Snigdha from iGEM IISER Tirupati and VIT vellore respectively. And we shall interview guests to share their insights on the ethics of synthetic biology. Today, we welcome Dr. Vijayalakshmi Subramanian to know and share her views on bioethics. She is an assistant professor at biology department, IISER Tirupati. Happy to have you with us today, ma'am.
It's my pleasure entirely, Shivangi. Thank you so much, guys, for inviting me. I'm happy to talk about ethics always. So, thank you, Snigdha, Jagan, Sanskriti, and Shivangi. And I'm smiling under this mask. It may not be evident, but I'm really happy to be here with you guys. Okay.
It's a pleasure to have you here with us, ma'am. So let's begin with our first question. When and why did you start exploring this field of ethics in life science research?
Yeah, so thank you for posing it like that, because ethics is in all aspects of science and not just synthetic biology. I mentioned it to Jagan that I don't directly work on synthetic biology, but of course we all use synthetic biology in different aspects of our research, recombinant DNA technology, modified organisms. Even though my work is very safe and simple, ethics is a big part of research. So I would say I started with ethics training on day 0 of my research. Before you venture into it, you want to know what is okay and what is not okay. This is our burden or our privilege as scientists, that we do not take advantage of our environment, of our fellow beings, and play science in a safe way. So day 0, before you start planning, you first figure out what is okay and what is not okay. My research experience started when I did my master's, so much later in life than you guys. So you guys are getting a very early training into science and ethics. Yeah, so that is when I started to learn about ethics. Yeah. Does that answer your question, or yeah?
Yep, it does.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
definitely does.
So our next question to you is, how is your experience working with ethics?
How's my experience been working with ethics? Actually, really good, because I would like to believe that I am an honest person, and I have an ethical compass directing me what is okay and what is not okay, what is correct and what is not correct. So same goes for science. And my experience has been good because I've worked with scientists throughout my scientific career who have been really ethical. Uh, how it starts with designing, planning experiments, giving right credit to others, making sure you're not contaminating the world with the wrong things. So making sure things are discarded in the right way after an experiment is done, how to not release things into the environment, and how to be fair to your colleagues and your fellow beings on this planet. So yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Ma'am, do you think ethics can affect the research progress in science, and how?
Definitely. So there are so many aspects of science and ethics in every aspect of that, right? Like I said, right from design, giving credit to others, designing things, making sure things are stored in a correct manner, things are discarded in the right manner, not contaminating, and then everything, all the scientific information is disseminated to scientific community and the public in the correct manner. So ethics is involved in all these different aspects of science, right from the beginning to the packaged product, right? So it is important that ethics plays an important role in this and every aspect of it. I feel that I'm answering your questions too short.
No, I think that's precisely
I've
to the
lost
point
you.
and
I'm
what we
not
need.
sure.
Ma'am, also, what differences do you find in ethics trained in India versus abroad? Like, should we frame collaborative ethical laws with other countries so that the development of science happens together?
Yeah, so ethics, so I would say that my experience here is not as intense mostly because of COVID. I've been here for 3 years now. Actually, I'm starting August 2020. So I started in 2019 August. So it has been 3 years. I completed 3 years here, but my interaction with my scientific colleagues in India has not been as intense because of COVID. I have not gone to meetings. Most of the meetings that I've been to are are online meetings over Zoom. And I've not interacted with my colleagues, visited scientific centers in India. So I would say I'm a little bit behind on what the ethical scene is here. But I would say that scientists who are successful and the scientists that I know in my field uh, who are in India are very ethical, because we publish, we interact with the scientific community globally. We publish in journals that are accessed by everybody. We share reagents, including strains that we make, with others in the scientific community, not just within India. So all of those have to follow ethical standards, right? If those are not followed, then there's a gap in the system, it falls apart, right? And so I would say, as far as I can gauge, the ethical compass is similar in India, although we do have to train our students from the very beginning. What I said, day zero, about ethical behavior in science. So I would say that ethics I've been mainly in United States. I've not been to Europe, but I would say the behavior is similar in majority of the cases. Of course, there are a few bad apples everywhere. It is not limited to one country or the other. And I am also part of the ethical committee at IISER Tirupati. So I give an biannual seminar and train students to think about ethical dilemmas and how they would address those situations. And I would say, it's really nice to see that our students, as far as I have seen, are able to come to the right conclusion. And then if, not all things are black and white, sometimes there are gray zones, and there you find out, you ask others, right? Some things are not as clear cut. But I would say we are off to the right start, at least, if not already there.
Our final question to you is, how important is it to integrate ethics into academic curricula in the field of life sciences?
Yeah, thank you. It's really important. It is very important, irrespective of what aspect of science you pursue. In the long run, ethics is important. Ethics is important in all aspects of life. So it's very important that we inculcate ethical thinking, ethical behavior from the very beginning, so that we don't have to correct a behavior. Rather, we begin with that behavior. That is the norm, right?
Great. I think that brings us to the end of this interview. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us, Dr. Vijay. We got to know a lot about bioethics, and your valuable inputs definitely help us and the people watching these video series to modulate and plan our projects accordingly. Thank you so much for taking your time and being with us here today. Additionally, this is okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Additionally, this is also a wrap on the series in entirety. So this series of interviews was a collaboration between IISER Tirupati and VIT Vellore. And this was the final video in this collaboration. So it's so joyful that it ended on such a good note. So thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Vijay.
Thank you, all of the panel members. It's a really nice initiative and collaboration that I can see across states or across different, institutes and different groups of students. It is really nice that you guys are collaborating like this, thinking about ethics, making sure our fellow scientists follow ethical behavior. Thank you for including me in this. I wish you all the best.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Vijay. So I guess we could have a small screenshot if it is possible.
Sure.